Hello readers, I'm Amy. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a standalone review of Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law by Mary Roach. This was released a little bit before my birthday in September, and I was just cruising the internet thinking like, well, what's coming out next month? And I've been waiting for Mary Roach to have another book release for a while now. And it's like, oh hey, she's releasing in my birthday month. Well, it's Mary Roach and it's my birthday month, so obviously I have to gift it to myself. So I did. I enjoyed it. It's not one of my favorite Mary Roach books, but I did enjoy it. I wonder how much of my enjoyment was just from the fact that it's got like this solid yellow cover. I love an awesome yellow book cover. Yellow isn't used nearly enough in books. But anyways, let's get on to the book review. I really love this part too. It looks like a national park patch and it has texture to it. It's a matte book cover, but you can almost feel the embroidery design on this, but it's not actually embroidery. Also, really quick, just apologies for whatever my hair is trying to do. Also, the reflection of my glasses, I just was not up for wearing my contacts today. I'm gonna go ahead and place this back here. Hopefully it's a hardcover so it doesn't flop off of my shelf. Let me see if I can move this a little bit so you can see it a little bit better in the background. There we go. So I feel like in order to discuss this book, I should tell you a little bit of my personal background. I live in Montana. I've always lived in Montana. I was born here. I grew up here. We are very rural and nature focused in Montana. Specifically, I grew up in the country. My dad was an outfitter, so he had a business where people paid him to stay with him for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and he would guide them around the outdoors and find places and animals to hunt, and that's kind of how he made his part of my family's living. So I've got just a lot of thoughts on animals in general. I always had pets. I always had dogs growing up. At one point I had chickens, so love pets, grew up with them. Pets are just my life. They are my children. But I also grew up hunting with my dad, sometimes fishing, but fishing he didn't usually torture me with because I find fishing really, really, really boring. Sorry. So in growing up hunting, I feel like I really learned a respect for wild animals. Like, these are creatures with their own lives, their own things going on. Some of them are very scary, some of them not so much. Respect them, but also it was great to grow up knowing exactly where my food was coming from. A lot of our vegetables were homegrown. Even though I'm not a huge vegetable person, I can appreciate that. Any meat that I ate was meat that we caught, so I didn't even eat a cow burger until I was in college, and my first attempt at trying it, I didn't like it all that much because I grew up on venison and that was the meat that I ate, and cow tasted so much different. Now things have kind of swapped around. My dad will give me meat that he's hunted, but it's not as large a part of my diet as it used to be. But regardless, I kind of grew up with this idea of these are the animals that we eat, these are the animals that we take care of, these are the animals that we raise for other purposes. My dad did often feed deer, still feeds deer from our house, so he got, I think it's like horse pellets or something, just these little treat pellets, and he'll take a bucket outside and he'll shake it, and the deer are like, oh, that means food's coming. And some of them will even eat out of his hand. He knows these animals by heart. He knows their features. He's given them names. He considers them kind of pets. He has a respect for them and their lives, and these are not the animals that we hunt. These are the animals that come to us for food and that we would enjoy viewing off of the porch of our house. So that's a little bit of how I grew up. Agree with it, disagree with it, that's how I grew up. That's kind of my views on things. Alright, the very blue background was kind of bothering me a little bit, so I turned on the overhead light too. I think this looks better. This is a better representation of the yellow cover of this book. So, anyways, Mary Roach. I've read every single book that she has written. I own almost every single book that she's written. Gulp is about the journey from mouth to anus as far as the digestive system. It's probably my least favorite. I don't dislike it, it's just my least favorite. Fuzz is above that. I think it's about on par with Spook, which is her like ghost hunting science book where she looks into that. So it's somewhere in there with the rankings. And this book was a little bit different from what I thought it would be. So it's about nature breaking the law. At least that's like how it's advertised. So I'm thinking like, oh, what happens when a moose is caught jaywalking? What happens when an animal commits murder? Like such and such a thing. And it is about that, but it's also not quite that. I don't know how to explain how it was different to me. But as usual with lots of her books, it's very science heavy. So almost the entire first half of the book was like when animals kill or injure. So we're talking about, I think it's jaguars in India. We're talking about elephants. We're talking about bears and mountain lions. Like, it's not just, oh, this animal has broken the law. It's more about animal management. I think that's a good way to put it. So I was expecting more humor and more legal insight, and it was more like science-based animal management type stuff. And a lot of it, even growing up around taxidermy, growing up around outfitting, growing up with pets, like a lot of this stuff was stuff that I didn't know, and I'm glad I've read it because of that. Like I said, we talk about those bigger predator animals, we look into birds, we look into conservation, we look into mice and rats, and how people try and get rid of invasive species, particularly in New Zealand. New Zealand was a huge topic for invasive species. You have the rabbits that you brought in, and then there was the stoats to manage the rabbits, and then there were the cats to manage the stoats, and now they have so many invasive predators that they're trying to get rid of, and there's this like plan to get rid of them by 2050. Anyways, it's more about animal management than necessarily like the legal side of things. Still really enjoyed learning. I will say a bit of a trigger warning. There's not really a lot of gory or graphic descriptions. Like, Mary Roach doesn't spend her time discussing animal torture in any way. But there is a lot of discussion. It's kind of the basis of the book. A lot of discussion of animal death and how they die. We're talking about poisons, we're talking about genetic modification, we're talking about traps, we're talking about neck breaking and head crushing, and just various ways that animals have been managed throughout the centuries. And that's something else to think about. Growing up in Montana, I live near Yellowstone. Yellowstone is mostly in Wyoming, but also partially in Montana. And growing up, there was a lot of people complaining about the wolves in Yellowstone and how they eat all the animals, or the coyotes around our house and how they injure a lot of the animals that my family might hunt for food. And that's something that Mary really deep dives into, where it's this discussion of, yes, the wolves eating the animals in Yellowstone are a problem. But why do we have the wolves? Because overpopulation of these herbivores who were like eating up all the food that all the other animals needed. Like, every animal that is a problem seems to have been introduced by us to solve another problem. And you can get your teams and go through your list of things that might happen and how to solve them before you introduce the animal. And the problem, the big problem, will always be something that you haven't thought of. So a lot of this book is forcing you to realize, like, if this animal is a problem, it's not because of the animal. It's not the animal's fault. It's you who introduced the animal. I think a really great kind of reflection of everything that she learned in researching this book was the very end of the last chapter. I don't really consider this a spoiler. Nonfiction, I think, is a little hard to spoil because you know what the premise of the book is. It kind of depends on the nonfiction. But anyways, I'm going to tell you about the last bit that she talked about. There is this rat that she ends up finding around her house. And her first thought is, oh, I should go get a trap, which there's a whole chapter on different rat traps and how ethical it is to use them. They talk about the classic victory traps, which are actually the best and the quickest death. So they talk about poisoned bait, which affects so many other animals in so many ways and needs so many modifications in order not to affect those animals. They talk about glue traps, which are very cruel and I will never ever use. But anyways, she sees this rat and her first thought is, oh, I need to get a trap. But then she stops to think, if she gets rid of this rat that is around her house and say eating fruit from her trees and stuff like that, if she gets rid of it, then that is putting up a vacancy sign for another rat to come in and the problem will continue. She discusses her neighbor who gets all of these squirrels coming to her house and she will trap all of them and move them to the park. They come right back. They know where her house is. They have their inner compasses. Like, they know how to get there. They know what they're doing. And she's thinking, well, why get rid of this rat when the problem's just going to continue? Like, it's the enemy I know versus the enemy I don't. So she just kind of leaves it. And she observes it every now and then. She's like, okay, it's fine. And one day she hears tappings in the walls and she learns that the rat has gotten into the walls. And her husband's like, well, you better take care of it because your new little friend is going to ruin our electricity. He's going to devalue our house, all this other stuff. And she's thinking, what is a really great way to deal with the problem of the rat in the walls? So what she does, she doesn't trap it, she doesn't bait it, she doesn't try and kill it or get rid of it. What she does is she sets up wildlife cameras in various places in her house until she catches on camera the entrance that the rat is using to get into her walls. So when the rat is not in her wall at the moment, her husband goes and just takes care of the entrance that the rat was using, and she didn't deal with the rat in her walls anymore. It was still around, but it wasn't causing damage to the house. And I loved that. That was just a great way to end the book and bring all of her learning together. A little bit of background actually on Mary Roach. I don't know that she has a degree in anything besides writing. I haven't really looked into that recently, but she will just take one topic, any topic, whether it's sex, cadavers, the military, like she will take one topic and just put her all into it and write a book on that. And I think she did really well with this. This book was a little bit slow for me. I think that's just because I haven't been big on nonfiction lately. I feel like I'm in the middle of a lot of nonfiction, but I'm not finishing a lot of nonfiction. So I am really glad that I did finally finish this. I've been working on it for a little less than 2 months. It is Nonfiction November when I'm recording this. I'm not sure if I'm going to release this review at the end of November or as part of the December Vlogmas thing. We'll see. I'm sure editing Amy will tell you. But yeah, I ended up giving it, I think, almost 4 stars. There were some parts that were a little slow for me, but I think that's just me reading nonfiction. Overall, it was a great book. Just be forewarned that there is a lot of animal death in this book, but I think that they are all excellent conversations to be having. So that's going to be it from me. Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. Maybe tell me a little bit about yourself and your relationships with animals down in the comments below. And I will see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.